When the French dropped into Yayun Bihanfage, they thought they were setting a trap. What they didn't know was that they were stepping into one. It was November 1953. French commanders believed they could draw out the Viet Minh, force them into open combat, and crush them with firepower. They picked a valley. Flat. Remote. Surrounded by hills they believed were too steep to be a threat. They built bunkers. Fortified positions with code-name charm. Beatrice, Dominique, Eliane. They believed no guerrilla army could reach them here. They believed wrong. Because General V. Nguyen, commander of the Viet Minh, saw more than a valley. He saw a bowl, and he planned to fill it with steel, fire, and revolution. His men, farmers, students, sons of a country still bleeding from decades of colonial rule, dragged artillery piece by piece up jungle-covered mountains. At night, in silence. No roads, no machines, just ropes, sweat, and a cause too strong to break. When the French finally realized what was happening, it was too late. By March 13, 1954, the valley was surrounded, and the hills they thought were useless now roared with hidden cannons. The first barrage hit Beatrice. Shells screamed from the darkness, shattering bunkers, igniting fuel depots, burying men alive in trenches they had once believed were safe. French soldiers, many just teenagers, woke to chaos, smoke, screams, static on the radio, and the gut-chilling realization that they weren't in control anymore. Viet Minh forces poured down from the hills, not in reckless waves, but with surgical coordination. Their trenches crept closer each night. A slow, strangling noose of mud and fire. Inside the French lines, panic brewed. Air resupply was failing. The skies were thick with flak. Rain turned everything to soup. Wounded men screamed for morphine that never came. But still, Paris insisted. Hold Yayun Bihanfage. At all costs. And the soldiers obeyed, because no one wanted to believe an empire could fall to peasants in sandals. But every shell, every trench, every drop of jungle rain, said otherwise. In part 2, I'll take you deeper into the siege, where desperation met determination, and the myth of colonial superiority began to collapse, inch by muddy inch. By the second week of the siege, Yayun Bihanfage had stopped being a fortress. It had become a tomb under construction. The French garrison, nearly 15,000 strong, was being buried alive, one trench at a time. The Viet Minh weren't rushing. They didn't need to. They let the valley rot from the inside. Every night, their trenches crept closer. By dawn, they were yards away. Invisible, silent, coiled like snakes in the mud. And when they attacked, it was precise, punishing, unstoppable. They hit strong points like Eliane and Dominique with waves of artillery so relentless. The French soldiers began calling the positions the meat grinders. They would retake a hill by day, only to lose it by night. Back and forth. Over and over. Hell is circular, one soldier wrote in his diary, and we keep marching through the same fire. Inside the French lines, morale shattered. Supplies dropped from planes, missed their targets, falling into Viet Minh hands. Ammo ran low. Rations turned to mold. Fresh water came from shell craters, tainted with blood and gasoline. Wounded men lay in dugouts, swarming with flies. Doctors performed surgeries with no anesthesia. They were down to using whiskey and prayer. Meanwhile, Janel tightened the noose. He knew time was his ally. Every day the French held out. They bled resources, lost hope, and lost the will to fight. And all the while, the world was watching. Paris promised reinforcements. Washington whispered about intervention. Maybe even air. but nothing came. Inside the valley, the men felt it. The abandonment, the betrayal. Rain soaked their uniforms. Mud sucked their boots. Shells exploded day and night. Sleep became a myth. And still, the Viet Minh advanced. They used bamboo bridges to cross flooded craters. They hauled artillery through jungles, breaking their backs for every inch. This wasn't just a siege. It was a statement, a message carved in blood. We are not your colony. Not anymore. By late April, the French were collapsing. Their airstrip was gone. Their medics were dying. Their officers were exhausted. And still, command in Paris sent the same order. Hold. But the only thing holding was the Viet Minh grip around their throat. In part 3, I'll take you to the final assault. When the lines broke, the bunkers fell. And an empire learned that steel alone cannot hold a nation. What happened next didn't just end a battle. It ended an era. May 7th, 1954. The final day. By then, Dien Bien Pha was no longer a battlefield. It was a crater. A scar in the jungle. A monument to arrogance and resistance. The French were broken. Their trenches flooded. Their bunkers collapsed. Their radios gone. The last holdouts at strongpoints like Eliane and Dominique were surrounded, bleeding, out of ammunition, out of time. Inside command bunkers, officers passed around grenades. Not to throw at the enemy, but to keep for themselves. And outside, the Viet Minh prepared for the last push. They didn't scream. They didn't charge like madmen. They moved like they'd always moved. Disciplined, methodical, relentless. Their flag, red and gold, soaked by rain, rose above the smoldering ridge. By late afternoon, the French command officially surrendered. Cease fire. Cease fire. We are done. Silence fell. The first true silence in 55 days. And in that silence, a truth echoed across continents. The empire was over. Nearly 11,000 French troops surrendered. Over 2,000 were already dead. And only a fraction would survive the long march to Viet Minh prison camps. For France, the defeat was a national trauma. A humiliation. The death knell of their colonial hold on Indochina. For the Viet Minh, it was more than a military victory. It was vindication. Proof that grit, belief, and blood could break even the greatest armies in the world. It wasn't about firepower, or uniforms, or empire. It was about home, and they had defended theirs with everything they had. When General walked the battlefield, he didn't gloat. He didn't pose. He simply looked at the bodies, at the silence, at the soil now soaked with a century's worth of struggle. Dien Bien Phu didn't just end a war. It birthed a nation. In the years that followed, the Geneva Accords would divide Vietnam. New wars would come. More blood. More fire. But what happened in that valley, in those 55 days, would never be undone. Because for the first time in modern history, a colonized people had risen up. And won. Thank you for watching Battle Reborn. If this story moved you, subscribe, share, and remember, history isn't made by those with the most power. It's made by those who refuse to kneel.